Hello and welcome to Second Rate Film School. My name's Andrew Wass, and today I'm going to be interviewing John R Dilworth, creator of one of my all-time favorite shows, Courage the Cowardly Dog. Welcome to the show, John.
Hello, Andrew. Very nice to be here. Nice to be anywhere, but especially here.
Well, I'm glad to have you on. I've been a lifelong fan of the series and even have the complete box set. And it's been a joy rewatching the show leading up to this discussion. I've probably watched more Courage in the past few weeks than I have in, I don't know, probably 15, 20 years. Well, with all that said, let's dive in. To start with, our story actually begins a little earlier than the November 12th, 1999 premiere of the series proper. Back in 1994, John made a short film called Dirty Birdie. While not actually having anything to do with Courage itself, the influence this short had on the series is undeniable. We see a lot of the hallmarks that Courage would later have: the irreverent humor, character designs, and the really interesting and unique music. Though obviously, the biggest stepping stone to the series came 1 year later in 1995 with the short film The Chicken from Outer Space. Pretty much all the elements that you would associate with the series were present here. You have the 1950s, B-movie sci-fi feel. You have Eustace and Muriel, Eustace's Ooga Booga Booga mask, Eustace being punished for his misdeeds in the short, and of course, Courage the Cowardly Dog. Now, John, can you talk about the creation and genesis of this short and how it got involved in the Cartoon Network What a Cartoon block?
The Chicken from Outer Space was just another short film, and I needed funding. So I heard that Fred Seibert was shopping for, some product. And initially I had given him Dirty Birdie. But Andrew, they weren't going to touch Dirty Birdie. If you've seen Dirty Birdie, they weren't going to put that on the air. So I had the storyboards for The Chicken from Outer Space. It was black and white. I was going to do it as a sci-fi movie in black and white. And I pitched that. And yeah, I was very excited about that. Initially, the Eustace didn't have a mask. He had a shotgun, just like Warner Brothers. And Eustace was firing at Courage, blasting him. He never hit him, of course, because what's the history of our animation? No one got hurt in Warner Brothers cartoons, MGM cartoons. It's just like that.
I can actually picture that perfectly. Just seeing Eustace going around the farmhouse with a shotgun, the really rough patterns being blown out of the side of the house, the couch, the props, etc. Courage just diving under everything for cover. It would have really been great and would have fit really right at home in a Looney Tunes cartoon. That being said, I can see why Cartoon Network said you couldn't do it. At least we did get the iconic running gag of the Ooga Booga Booga mask, which that's a pretty good consolation prize. This short was actually so well received that it was nominated for Best Animated Short at the 1996 Academy Awards, unfortunately losing to the Wallace and Gromit short, A Close Shave. Now, John, what was your reaction to being nominated for an Academy Award?
Well, it was a thrill, of course. It's a great honor to be selected by your peers for some distinction in a pursuit that you're passionate about, of course.
Pivoting briefly back to the What a Cartoon Shorts program, a lot of heavy hitters from Cartoon Network in this era came out of that program as well. Dexter's Lab, Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, Cow and Chicken, to name a few. But your short was the only one that had the acclaim of being nominated for an Academy Award. And despite that fact, it actually had the longest lead time from the short to the premiere of the series. With the short airing for the first time on February 18th, 1996, and the series being released November 12th, 1999. So what was the deal with that long of a lead time?
There was a political transition. Hanna-Barbera was folding. And at the time, Ted Turner was interested in starting a cartoon studio, a network. And it was called Cartoon Network. And Betty Cohen was the first president. And it was amazing because you had a couple of really powerful brains behind that. You had Linda Saminsky and Mike Lazo. And I know Brian Miller was part of that too. And Fred Seibert and Betty Cohen. I mean, you couldn't get a more dynamite group of executives that understood animation. And that's vital.
Now, one would imagine one of the major political considerations at the time was the scare factor of the show, and it was pretty damn scary. But putting that to the side for a moment, I think a lot of people overlook the fact that there's a lot of really heartfelt, emotional episodes in the show. I'd say about 1/3 of the episode. So not a majority, but not one-offs by any means. Most of the casual fans of the show just consider it the scary show. Do you think that's an unfair portrayal of it?
The show had so many dimensions. Uh, it's open for whatever group is interested. Of course, horror is easy. And when you mix horror with comedy, it becomes a kind of novelty. So no.
Now, one of the most recognizable elements of the show is the soundtrack, and it hands down is one of my favorites of all time. And I think it's very underrated and is quite possibly one of the best soundtracks to any TV show ever. So, John, what was the process like in creating what your vision for the soundtrack would be?
Well, immediately I wanted the cartoon to sound like cinema. So it every cartoon we scored it like as though it were a feature film. And Jody Gray and Andy Ezrin this is exactly their style. We were very lucky. At the time, Robert Marcus, who was a producer of mine, he introduced me to Jody, and we actually were doing little Sesame Street shorts, preschool shorts, using my characters, Noodles and Ned. And then we moved on to the series. But the original short, The Chicken from Outer Space, was composed by Steven Saltzman in LA. And I was still after the same theatrical vibe.
Now, one element of the show I'd like to touch on is Marty Grabstein's performance as Courage. Rewatching the show for the first time, probably ever, in a linear fashion, I didn't realize how much Courage talked in the first few episodes and then how quickly that dropped off. I'd say probably about 90% of his lines are cut, and by season 2, he's just yammering and screaming mostly and pantomiming what he has to communicate. So, what was the genesis behind that decision, and how did that impact Marty's voiceover sessions?
Well, it was decided early on by the executive team and myself. I agreed that maybe it was better that Courage didn't talk. And instead we just used the babble and odd phrases here and there. But in terms of the recording, yeah, we had Marty come in and do all his babbling. But what William and I did especially was kind of recycle Marty's first season babbles, because we found that those were the best of all the 4 seasons, and we created sounds. It's just a natural way of recording and cutting. I'm not, maybe not everybody does this, but we're New Yorkers, we're independent filmmakers. We just make it up. Right? It's like Lionel Wilson. When he passed away, we continued to use Lionel's lines throughout. Just to give it body, because we had Arthur, who is great, but Arthur's not Lionel, right?
Another thing that makes Courage such a unique show is how hands-on involved you are with every episode. First off, you directed every single episode. Then you wrote 6 episodes, 2 of which were the series' only 2-part episodes. And you were just there pretty much every day, touching every different element of the show, it seems. That's pretty much unheard of when you talk about a creator being involved in their show like that. So, what was that process like, being that dramatically involved with every step of the way of production?
It was exciting. That's why I did it. And also, I have a very particular production methodology, and that is I have to bless every department with my involvement. And it's because I can do all of the departments. Oh, the music I can't do. Sound effects I can't do. But I have such a great ear, and I know exactly what I want. The premises for every story, a large majority were written by me. Because if the premise wasn't there, I wasn't interested in doing the story. And I had a writers' meeting workshop that was modeled after Termite Terrace from Warner Brothers, where we had all these writers, with David Cohen being our head writer. and we had just funny people and people that were in different um, mediums of writing. Let's say one was a playwright, for instance. So we would have structure and characterization and somebody that could tell us if we were off. And I had a unique way of working. I would sit there with everyone and we would beat out this premise. And then that premise would go off for a draft, a treatment. And then I would get that treatment and I would edit that. And then I'd send that back to David. And then we would meet again and develop that treatment into a script. And then David would write the script, or whoever was writing at the time. We had other guest writers. And that script would go to me and I would start editing and rewriting here and there. And I would actually do designs for the design department, and even animation poses on the script. And one of the things I most wish I had preserved were those original Dilworth doodled edited scripts with the little drawings on them. Wow. Anyway, so it was just like that. I got involved in everything. I'm a filmmaker. I'm not in TV. I'm still making films. And as a filmmaker, I see the whole thing. I know I know what I want.
And I think that's what makes Courage one of the most unique shows on TV at the time. And I don't even mean just Cartoon Network or kid shows. I mean just shows in general.
Well, I don't want to come across as some megalomaniac. We had amazing talents. And I like to think that this talent, this level of competency was only improved by their trust in the director, in the director's vision. It wasn't like I was closed. I was completely open. Anybody's ideas can come and go, but if something was a good idea, I didn't deny it. I used it. And among our team that was especially valuable to me was the multi-hyphenated, talented William Hohauser, who, I like to joke, we used to joke that he was my works if I played the role of Walt Disney. It's just this amazing talent that, we've collaborated for over 30 years, I think 35 years, and we're working on our new film right now. So yeah, it's all these great people, and they, I chose well.
Between your hands-on approach and trusting a very talented crew to craft a lot of really great stories is, I think, what makes this show still so great all these years later. It was just lightning in a bottle. I'm continually amazed that nearing 30, I'm still discovering new aspects about this show. And I don't just mean jokes that went over my head and, stuff like that. I'm talking about like a lot of nuance and storylines that flew over the heads of kids that was more aimed at the adults. We were able to get the broad message of the episode, of course, but you put a lot of subtext in there that we as little kids wouldn't have understand, but older audience members could still get the same story, but have a lot more depth to it actually at the same time. And again, I'm just truly amazed what you were able to get away with these. And I don't mean just the scares. I mean, crafting really beautiful and deep stories. You've handled really heavy topics like death of parental figures, kidnapping, murder, domestic abuse. All very heavy topics that you guys handled really beautifully. Rewatching the series finale, Remembrance of Courage Past and Perfect, almost had me in tears while I was prepping for this.
Yeah, I always knew that Courage was an orphan. And to be abandoned, all of these things are so natural for childhood. The fear of abandonment and the loss of love. And being a dog, it was so easy to work through that. A child's point of view or feelings, what little I knew about it because I wasn't a child. But I was projecting, fears that I had when I was a child.
I think what's truly amazing about this episode is you basically took a throwaway line in the intro of he was abandoned as a puppy, something that I think most kids didn't really think too deeply of, and crafted a really beautiful origin story for Courage that really delved into a lot of his issues, showed us the loving side of him and Muriel's relationship forming, and even explained where his name came from in a very tender scene where Muriel thinks so highly of him. It's truly beautiful, and I'm not the only one who thinks that. This is the highest ranked episode on IMDb, so you quite literally saved the best for last.
Well, that's a pity because I really wanted to do a fifth season, but the show proved a challenge for the new management at the time. And when I learned that we weren't going to get a fifth season, it was vital, don't you think, Andrew, to write that last episode that would shed more on the history of the characters and what the little dog meant. And what was so lovely is that I engaged a mentor of mine, the filmmaker Michael Sporn, who really gave me among my early breaks. He would adapt children's books into animated films, and he was also nominated for an Oscar. And I had a great time, and so I was able to reciprocate by having him do this whole sequence where Courage is just a little pup with his parents.
Now, as I said, there were a fair amount of very emotionally charged episodes. Two of them I want to discuss are ones you actually wrote, The Tower of Dr. Zolost and The Mask. Both are the only two-parters of the series. So, to begin with, what was it like writing the two longest episodes of the series, but also the two most emotionally charged episodes as well?
Well, satisfying. At the time, we were only doing what I'm capable of at the time. I mean, I wouldn't want to look back at it and start criticizing it for its lack of craft or how I could have improved things. But we had a lovely formula, and it was one that I felt absolutely comfortable in. So writing something like The Tower of Dr. Zolost, and Zolost is roughly translated to sorrow or sadness in Croatian, because I was spending a lot of time in Croatia at the time. And the tower itself was modeled after the old medieval tower that's overlooking the city of Zagreb. I tell you, the cartoons are not just random. They have a lot of significance to my life. And I used it in the cartoons. So The Mask, there was multiple things I was getting away with. I don't know how. It's like what you said, Andrew. How did we get away with this? I don't even know that these cartoons are being aired. I've heard from colleagues in Europe that they're edited, but I haven't seen it, and it really doesn't matter. But, same-sex love, male brutality, and it's all there. What about female brutality? No one ever talks about how a woman is just beating the hell out of a man. Well, it's a dog, but look at that. It's animal abuse. I mean, it's just over and over. I mean, I would have to go back and comb through all of the themes that we were able to do. And Escape from New York was a big influence on that. I know that where the dog lived on the wrong side of the tracks, I was thinking Escape from New York. I don't know why I brought that up, Andrew. You'll have to bring us back to the topic.
No, I love seeing the method behind the madness. Joking aside, that is actually a very interesting point, because the way you depict the city here isn't the same way you've depicted cities in previous episodes. But the way this city is designed is a lot more real and dour. You really get the feeling of desperation Bunny is in when Courage comes to rescue her. Again, not something you would typically see in a children's show. The other design aspect from this episode that I really appreciate is the, no pun intended, masking of a lesbian relationship. By one, making them different species, and two, stressing that they're just good friends.
Well, friends, yeah. What's wrong with that?
Exactly. Nothing wrong with it at all. Please don't write us angry letters, parental watchdog groups of the 2000s. Or just modern day bigots. But it truly is one of the most beautiful and tender episodes of the series. We even get a really nice sweet moment between Eustace and Muriel, who spent most of the episode just fighting with each other, which was a rare thing to see Muriel getting angry. as she usually just lets the barbs Eustace throws just roll right off her back. In the end, they both apologize to each other and reaffirm how much they love each other, which again is just so sweet. I know it's fun to see Eustace get smacked over the head with a rolling pin or something bad happen to him as comeuppance for something he did to Courage in most episodes. But this moment, and a few others throughout the series, really inform on the character of Eustace, and really explain why such a sweet woman like Muriel could be with a really miserable SOB like Eustace. We see here that, yes, he can have a really rough and gruff exterior, but he truly does love her, maybe the only thing in the world that he loves, and that she can bring the nice side of him out. This is also important to distinguish the difference between Eustace being a jerk that we can laugh at for being mean, and the real serious issues of abuse being portrayed between Mad Dog and Bunny.
There were two specials that I was engaged to write at the time I was living in Barcelona. There were half hours. One was for Halloween and the other one was for Christmas. And one of the stories, I'm not sure if it was Halloween, but I think the Halloween special was I was delving into when Muriel and Eustace met and the act that Eustace never overcame, that he swallowed. And that was, it was related to Muriel's Eustace's adversary. Muriel had a previous lover, another lover that was courting her at the same time that Eustace was. And Eustace chose not to act, that ultimately led in the death of his adversary. But he deliberately chose not to act.
Oh, wow.
And that kept with him. And you see what happens to him. He never talks about it, but he's a miserable sod.
Yeah, wow. That sounds incredibly amazing. And I'm incredibly bummed we didn't see it because that could have had the potential to be one of the best episodes of the series.
Yeah, I was jazzed to tell this tale. Totally jazzed.
That being said, I can see why Cartoon Network pulled the plug on it. Yeah, I can see on the surface why Cartoon Network would say that's not a story appropriate for children, but I think it's a very important lesson to teach kids that the ramifications of your actions and how they can ripple through your life and really inform the person you'll become. So in this case, we can see this action causes Eustace to become the miserable person we know him for.
Well, I like full novelistic backgrounds on characters. However, Courage wasn't designed for kids. I wasn't, a random 10-year-old maybe, but the 10-year-old in me that grew up on Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers cartoons weren't for kids, they were for adults. And I was straddling these two worlds. And there is nothing offensive in the series. I mean, I don't think a kid, the way I would have handled that Halloween special, it would not have been, well, so obvious. It would have been done with a little bit of style. So you're not offended, but you get the impact of its message.
Oh, of course. I can imagine this being like The Mask, where it's very subtly done, where kids would understand the more broad message, but a lot of the subtlety and nuance would be missed by them and be aimed directly at the older audiences.
Yeah, there was a lot of prejudice when the show aired initially among parents who actually thought it was too scary for a cartoon. And it was given this interesting stamp of you couldn't be 7 years of age or younger. You had to be over 7 to watch it. And I always thought that was a mark of distinction, like an honor. Because the first thing you do when you're a kid is when you're met with a constraint, what do? You go ahead and it encourages you.
So the series is now wrapped up, but that's not the last of Courage. In 2013, you made an 8-minute CGI short titled The Fog of Courage. Interestingly, though, this didn't air domestically in the US on Cartoon Network. It only aired internationally on affiliates around the globe. So, can you shed a little light about the history of this? And is there any truth that this was potentially intended to be a pilot for a revival?
The Fog of Courage was an initiative done in Hong Kong by Turner Asia. And they wanted to continue Courage. I don't think they understood why the network wasn't doing anymore. And they loved it for their market. and it was their intention to do it in CG, which I was fine with. And I did a lot of it in Spain, working with Betty Close, a CG producer. And then we went to Singapore and they did the heavy lifting.
Well, we're now 28 years removed from the short and nearing the 25th anniversary of the series. So, what do you think the legacy of the show is all these years later?
I don't understand. I don't get the legacy part. Of course, I love that we all did something good in the world. I always say that. And that if fans continue to discover this cartoon and they get something out of it, generation over generation, and I know because I hear from them, it's for me, it's a great honor that I've done something worthwhile. And that's what I get out of it.
Well, as one of the lifelong fans, I can speak for a lot of us by saying thank you for doing this. This was truly such a fantastic show and a huge part of our childhoods, and we're very grateful for it. Now, before we go, is there anything you want to share? Are you working on anything currently?
Right now, I'm producing my new short film. It's called Howl If You Love Me. It's a romantic horror comedy, and it's very exciting. We got about just a little bit over 3 minutes of animation completed. It's going to be about 7 minutes long, and that's what I put all my energy in. I love making short films. It's what I've always done.
Well, there you have it. John, thank you for coming on. It was a real pleasure getting to talk to you and get a peek behind Courage.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrew. Thanks for having me on.
Now, the really exciting thing I have to say is this isn't the end of this discussion about Courage with me. Over on my channel on Second Rate Film School, linked in the descriptions, is a 3-part retrospective that dives into the entire history of the show. In it, we talk about a lot of fan favorite episodes like Freaky Fred, The Last of the Star Makers, Troubles with the Censors, How Everyone Got Hired, and so forth and so on. It also involves a lot of interviews with alumni from the show, including head writer David Stephen Cohen, staff writer and animatic supervisor William Hohauser, composer Jody Gray, and Courage himself, Marty Grabstein. It's a ton of fun, and you should check it out for sure. It's got a lot of information, a lot of cool stuff. Until then, I'm Andrew Wass, and I hope you've enjoyed your time with us.